Solitary Reaper, one of the most beautiful poems by William Wordsworth. Let us go through this brief, lovely poem and make a brief critical appreciation of it. Behold her single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself. Stop here or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain, and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travellers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. A voice so thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. Will no one tell me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for old, unhappy, far off things and battles long ago. Or is it some more humble lay, familiar matter of today? Some natural sorrow, loss, or pain that has been and may be again. Whatever the theme the maiden sang, as if her song could have no ending, I saw her singing at her work and over the sickle bending. I listened, motionless and still, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. So, coming to the critical appreciation, well, we know that we have to first of all talk about the substance. And in this poem, William Wordsworth versifies his emotions that he experienced while overhearing a folk song sung by a Scottish Highland farmer girl. During his usual walks among the beauties of nature, he happened to pass by a Highland lass in a Scottish village who was reaping the harvest and singing a plaintive song all by herself. Simple notes and charming voice of the maiden completely mesmerized the poet. In spite of not understanding the language in which it was being sung, he felt that the song was more soothing than the so-called solacing and melodious tweets of nightingales and cuckoo birds. Being unfamiliar with the Scottish language, from the plaintive tone of the singer, he speculates that the song may be about some old, unhappy, far-off things, or some battle, or some personal sorrow or pain that has been and may be again. After a while, he quietly slipped away from the sight without disturbing the chanting maiden. But for many days, he remained under the happy spell of that song that had deep relation with the nature. And this is the most recurring philosophy in Wordsworth poetry, that the long-lasting impact of the time we spend with nature, it sustains and props us in the sorrows and difficulties when we need energy and solace to face them. Coming to the language of this poem, we find that the poem seems to be steeped in emotions that the poet is experiencing. In his preface to the lyrical ballads, Wordsworth strongly upholds the idea of simple, rather rustic language in poetry, and certainly the language of this poem is perfectly in tune with this theory. A few archaic words like yawn, chant, and lass also become easily understandable in their context. Besides lovely cadence, the poem has simple conversational tone, and the reader does not find any difficulty in understanding the matter and philosophy of this poem. Most importantly, language stirs our emotions of seeing and listening. That is the special quality of Wordsworth's diction. And coming to the imagery of the poem, we find that the poem has to be called a small painting, in which both reality and imagination are fused together to create an unforgettable impression upon its reader. The reaping and singing of the beautiful maiden, weary bands of travelers in some Arabian sand, being solaced by the soothing nightingale songs, and the silence-breaking song of cuckoo bird in some island of farthest Hebrides, the remembrance of old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago. An imbued reading of the poem deeply affects our sense of seeing and hearing. The poem begins with the word behold, and our visual sense is stirred. Then again the poet asks vehemently, oh listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. A lovely metaphor. It is the simple, exquisite description that renders life and magical charm to all the lovely scenes of this poem. Sound effects. We find that every stanza of the poem is made up of 8 lines. Each line has 8 syllables, 4 stressed and 4 unstressed, that make 4 beats. Only the 4th line in every stanza has 3 beats, giving a reflective pause to our reading. The 1st and the 3rd line in every stanza do not rhyme, but the 2nd and 4th line do. And then the last 4 lines are fluent rhymed couplet. This imparts an exquisite variation to the loud recitation of this poem. It seems as if the poet is in a trance-like state. softly talking to the reader, taking care not to disturb the singing and reaping maiden. Most striking lines. Well, the last two lines of this poem that sums up Wordsworth's philosophy about nature are the most striking lines of this poem to me. Wordsworth believes that impact of the nature upon human mind is long lasting and it sustains and invigorates him in dreary and bleak moments of life. This is why this priest of nature always exhorted people to be in the lap of nature for real peace and tranquility.